Look to do this, and I think it's to some it should be blatantly obvious exactly what's happening here.
Yeah.
With this jump on the bandwagon to be critical of even the notion of critical race theory, and now that critical race theory is involved, everybody assumes that these proposed changes to legislation is strictly tied to that. But could you tell everyone about the proposed changes that were supposed to occur in standards in 2006 and how that never manifested?
Well, I think a part of the problem with the state of Mississippi and with this effort is trying, on the one hand, not to become swept up in national standards that are elsewhere that have nothing to do with critical race theory, but at the same time protecting this ideology that they consider critical race theory. And just to step back and talk about the critical race theory, one of the things about that hearing and the revisions and about the legislation that's been proposed is far beyond anything that you would really consider critical race theory. Because on the one hand, critical race theory is a theoretical framework that's basically used in law schools.
Yeah.
This legislation that's been proposed and this revision that's taking place has nothing to do with that. It's basically, as I see it, dead set against teaching the real racial and racist history of the state and of the nation. It's far beyond that. And it reminded me that when I returned to Jackson State from graduate school in 1971, I was observing a student teacher at Whitman Middle School. And when I went out to observe this teacher, he was almost in tears when we had our talk after. He said, Dr. Phillips, said they won't even let me teach about Martin Luther King, and that's right in the textbook. So there's an effort to get rid of anything that talks about the real racial and racist history of the state and the nation. That's what this movement is all about. And you can get it from reading the legislation that's being proposed as well as from the hearings that were taking place.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think is comical to me is it was fine to talk about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks as long as you kept the statement to we shall overcome, and Martin wants everybody to live together as one.
Yeah.
But when you get into the fact that before he died, he looked at the fact that equity as opposed to equality needs to be the path that we looked at, and he looked at the economic disparities that existed, and his mission started to go there. It wasn't. They don't repeat that so much when they quote Martin Luther King.
That part of it.
Just, I have a dream. That's it. So it's still a dream, but Wanda, what were you gonna say to me? Go ahead.
To be honest, I just don't know what to say because we have lived a life where people have died for us to be free. People are still sacrificing themselves to give us civil rights. And right now, it needs to be taught. It needs to be taught in the schools. Our kids do not understand what their forefathers lived through, what our great grandparents lived through, and they're just taking a life every day of just taking advantage of a situation, and they don't understand how we got here. So when they're talking about, not teaching history, it's not just black history. It's history.
Genuine history.
It's genuine history.
That's what they want.
And that's what they don't want. They don't want our children to know what actually happened. Well, what do we do about that? The question is, what do we do about it? Because it's not fair for our kids. Our kids are growing up in an era right now where they're living to die.
Absolutely.
And they don't understand why they're living to die. But I think if they had some understanding on why they're living to die, or living to rot in jail, they might have a whole new turnaround, a new lease on life.
Yeah.
I told somebody the other day, this is a new world order. That's what I call it, a new world order. Because when they're trying to just erase history, you can't erase history.
Nope.
You know, and why would you want to erase history? And why? Because they are what? Going to look like the bad guys. Well, first of all, it's not just white people. There were black people involved in that also. So everybody took a part in that. And I'm not ashamed to say it. You know, everybody took a part in what happened. And we all should know the history. You know, my grandparents used to talk about how they watch, you know, people come and get black men and hang them from trees in Neshoba County. You know, they kept me from saying something to the wrong person because of what happened to Emmett Till. Because when I would come home every year, it was, you know, I'm from Chicago. You know, we lived like that. It wasn't talked about. It was more talked about down here than up north. Right. We had more killings up north. You know, we were running neck and neck. But when we're living in the South, and we're living right now, like I said, we're living to die. It's a new world order. They're locking our children up. Whether they're locking them up in jail, they're locking them up in the mental homes, they're taking them away from the families. We're not allowed to whoop our children. And now they want to take away a history that I feel that needs to be taught. We need to understand. So if we can just get with the state and Tate Reeves and whoever else, you know, they need to understand this. We are human. We have feelings. We are human beings, and we have a right to open up and say what has happened to us. You know,
and what is still happening.
And what is still happening, right? You know, they're taking our black children, and this is what they don't understand. They're locking your sons and daughters up and throwing away the key. Because guess what? In the future, they're going to be back out here working for them. They're going to be out here cleaning streets. They're going to be out here, who knows? We still got cotton fields in Mississippi now, don't play. You know, and our children need to understand what is the depth of this problem that we're having right now. The mothers and fathers, they need to understand why your children are being taken away.
You know, Martin Luther King spoke to the rope that hung people from trees being replaced by bullets. And I think we see that today from the killings of us among us, but also death by pen through legislation as well. And I think that it's absolutely critical that people not start this tangent of, because I hear people say it all the time and it drives me crazy. If you talk about the injustice through an unjust system, well, what about black on black crime? First of all, it's not a thing. Black people killing black people. There's no, if you're not going to call white on white crime, don't say black on black crime. Because crime is based on proximity and where you are.
That's right.
That's where it's going to happen, who you're the closest to.
That's right.
So let's squash that. But moreover, let's be able to walk and talk at the same time. Okay, we have a double edge, and I think a triple edge sword in a sense as black people. Yes, we do have to fight against white supremacy and the injustice that exists in this system of inequity. And yes, we have a community issue that exists. We can do both. There's no let's fix this and then that.
Right.
Or change will never occur. But Dr. Phillips, what would you say are steps that people can take as a community in not only educating themselves on this, give us some resources where people can fully educate themselves on this. I know you mentioned the legislation piece. Most people don't have the wherewithal to understand the writing in the legislative bills per se. So is there somewhere where they're broken down into layman's terms, or is there anywhere else where people can defer to really have an understanding?
Look, at the hearing, I was very happy to see a young lady named Erica Weber Jones.
Mm-hmm.
She's the president of MAE,
Mm-hmm.
and she's fairly young. I really appreciate the position that she's taking, and I want to brag a little bit because she was one of my better students. I was also happy to see Kennedy Scout of the Jackson Federation team.
Absolutely.
She's another young lady who's really on the ball. I was happy to see Miss Geraldine Bender, who's president of the Mississippi Federation of Teachers. These are individuals who have a lot of that first-hand knowledge about what's happening with the standards, what's happening to the curriculum, and I have found all three of them to be very open and willing to talk about these kinds of things. So that'll be one of the things I say. Make sure you contact the Mississippi Federation of Teachers, the American Federation of Teachers, and the Mississippi Association of Educators.
Mm-hmm.
I was also happy the week before that when Derek Simmons led the walkout of the Mississippi Senate when they began debating and voting on the so-called critical race theory bill that was there. And again, Derek is a person who's easy to talk to.
Yes.
And let me brag again. I taught Derek when he was at Jackson State. Solomon Norwood, who's a senator right here for the Hinds County, Mississippi. Those are two people who are very approachable and very knowledgeable about it. And those are people that you ought to be willing to talk to. And thirdly, just in order to get the basic documents, you can easily contact the Mississippi Department of Education and just get the first-hand revisions that are being proposed. And then, in your churches and your schools and things, then have debates and discussions about it. And as I say that, I think about my good friend, I hope I'm not giving him a lot of extra work, but Mr. Frank Figures is also very open and willing to talk about these kind of things, and he's on the Jackson Public School Board.
Yes.
We could probably go on looking at different organizations and entities that deal with these issues, who have people who are willing to talk with you about them. And I'm saying that because it's much easier to understand and get a grasp on if you're talking with those people as opposed to you're just reading the resources yourself based on what you see on the internet or elsewhere.
Absolutely. And I want to invite everyone today. There's a free event. It's online. History is Lunch with Frank Figures. Stories and secrets from the past. This is being sponsored by the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, the Museum of Mississippi History, and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. It'll be live on Facebook. So anyone who wants a treat, Mr. Figures is a walking